Buddhist Practice in Accordance to the Buddha's Teachings by Venerable Rungruan Papasaro, Dr. Rungruan Lim Chu Patapa. In principle, the system of Buddhist practice is based on the collection of suttas of the Buddha's teachings, which can be categorized into 5 groups as follows. Firstly, the collection of suttas on the Buddha's experience on the day of his enlightenment. Secondly, the Buddha explicitly explained on how to perform the Buddhist practice for the mind purification and the mind liberation in several occasions. After the Buddha enlightenment, the Buddha taught his students on how to follow the path and way for the enlightenment. Thirdly, the collection of suttas for the mind purification on the threefold study strategy. Although the defilements may appear to randomly arise inside the mind, but by having a clear understanding on how the defilements are aggravated in a pattern of formations, then we can apply a proper dharma to cope with them. The Buddha suggested to have a solution strategy to systematically cleanse the mind, so-called the threefold study strategy, starting with study on morality so that we can learn on how to abandon the rough defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion rightly, then study on the mind so that we can learn on how to abandon the middle defilements of 5 lower fetters rightly, and finally study on wisdom development for the destruction of the taints with cessations of craving, cling, and ignorance. In the process of dependent origination. Fourthly, the collection of suttas explaining on the mind development in terms of the 37 factors for the enlightenment. In this sutta, the Buddha outline a framework of the Buddhist practice in step by step with the critical milestones of mind development during the Buddhist practice. And fifthly, the collection of suttas explaining on how to perform the practice at each specific step. Detailed lists of suttas will be highlighted when getting into each step of the practice. The system of Buddhist practice in accordance with the Buddha's teachings can be defined in 8 stages of mind development, with specific suttas describing on how to perform in each step can be presented as follows. 1. Readiness preparations for the practice. An emphasis here is to understand that the Buddhist practice is an introspective learning system, not a magical practice like the others. Although there were many types of practices before the Buddha, but no one could earn an enlightenment. The goal of Buddhist practice is make a mind development by purifying the mind and to learn the truths of life within nature, so that we can liberate the mind from suffering. Therefore, we have to study in accordance with the Buddha's teachings, and following to the path and way of the footprint of the Buddha correctly. 2. Mindfulness establishment and development. No matter what kinds of practice experiences you may have before, but when stating Buddhist practice, everyone has to begin with initializing a mindfulness first. In performing a Buddhist practice, a mindfulness is used throughout the Dharma learning from the starting to the finishing. 3. Performing Yoniso Manasikara. Once being able to initialize a mindfulness and learning on the mind conditions, then we have to learn on how to apply the mindfulness with careful attention on Dharma to abandon an arising unwholesomeness, and then the mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. This is a clear demonstration of the benefit of Dharma. This special technique of Yoniso Manasikara is a foundation to study the Dharma of the Buddha when performing Buddhist meditation. 4. Performing Buddhist meditation. By performing Yoniso Manasikara as a background operational routine, that is, whenever having a consciousness, then having a mindfulness to monitor the mind condition, and if necessary applying a proper dharma as wisdom to resolve any arising unwholesomeness, and then the mind will be wholesomeness. The dharma will be investigated and reviewed carefully with practical experiences. This is a way to study the dharma of the Buddha's teachings. The Buddhist meditation is composed of 2 parts as follows. 4.1 The Buddhist meditation initialization with Dharma. In Buddhist practice, a mind will become concentrated by having mindfulness to abandoning an arising unwholesome one, then the mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. This is a special technique in Buddhism in having a mindfulness with concentration. Therefore, it is very necessary to learn how to initialize the mindfulness meditation correctly in accord to the Buddhist teachings by performing the Buddhist meditation with mindfulness carefully. The Buddhist meditation is a special technique of learning on how to use mindfulness with careful attention for having an instructed cognition development in Buddhism. 4.2 The application of Buddhist meditation to abandon the unwholesome thought of 5 lower fetters, hindrances. Once being able to perform the Buddhist meditation or the mindfulness meditation to abandon all the rough defilements, then proceeding forward into the realm of thoughts of middle defilements which are classified into 5 lower fetters, namely desire for sensual pleasure, ill will, depression, anxiety, and doubt. By performing a mindfulness meditation, the mind will keeps on abandoning all the lower fetters along the courses of thought to an initial thought of the mindfulness absorption. The main difference between the mantra meditation and the Buddhist meditation is that the mantra meditation will rush the mind into absorption without cleansing all the 5 lower fetters, therefore there is no instructed cognition development in the Brahman practice. 5. Performing the mindfulness absorption. This is sometimes called a deep mindfulness meditation. In Buddhist practice, after being able to cleanse all the 5 lower fetters along the courses of thought, then the mind will dwell into the inner mind, and encountering with initial thoughts in mindfulness absorption. We can realize that all kinds of unwholesome thoughts are originated from initial thoughts, therefore if we can abandon the initial thought by liberated thinking, then the mind will be clear out from any kinds of troubling thoughts. The Buddha called the success of this part to become the master of the courses of thought. The mindfulness to be neutral to any kinds of received mental object, then the mindfulness will be developed to be a purified mindfulness with no bias or preference, or distortion on the arising mental phenomena. And this a kind of mindfulness to be used in performing an insight observation. 6. Performing an insight observation on the 4 mindfulness foundations, that is, the body, the feeling, the mind, and the Dharma, respectively. The Buddha called this part of Buddhist practice, the main pathway to the enlightenment. That is, having a purified mindfulness to see the Dharma of mental phenomena in the process of dependent origination. The mind will develop an instructed cognition to gain insight wisdom on the process of dependent origination. 7. The wisdom development. In the wisdom study, the cognitive process will be activated for wisdom development by the 4 noble truths on each part of the process of dependent origination, including a whole system. This wisdom will be used in guiding the execution of mind processing into the right pathway. The Buddhism has no interest in any kinds of supernatural powers because they are useless in resolving problems inside the mind. 8. The application of insight wisdom for the destruction of the taints with the cessations of craving, clinging, and ignorance in the process of dependent origination, and then the mind is liberated, and this is the way to make an end of suffering in life.